I know we all use probiotics in clinical practice probably quite frequently, but I do think that there are some, what I would see as key points that I don't think necessarily all clinicians are aware of that would help them and their patients get the most out of the probiotic prescription. And typically these products contain freeze-dried, also lyophilized, live bacteria, and sometimes yeast. Most commonly from genera Lactobacillus and Bifidobacteria, but obviously not exclusively. There are newer ones coming to the market that might have Bacillus species in them, and are there even more novel ones that have just recently hit the US market that have Akkermansia strains, characteristics, and medicinal qualities. Yes, so I think one of the key points here is actions, attributes, and characteristics of strain specific. So with those breeds of dogs, we see obviously difference in physical size and hair length and all those sort of characteristics. We don't see that with strains within a certain species of bacteria, but we do see differences in lots of different areas, such as metabolic end products in terms of what short-chain fatty acids they produce, what percentage of lactate versus acetate versus propionate, for example, whether they can resist gastric acid or bile salt as a strain-specific trait, like this, because the right probiotic strain will be helpful for metabolic syndrome. But that said, one probiotic strain that speeds up colonic transit time is probably not going to be the one that's going to help with bacterial vaginosis. There's some probiotics that help reduce blood pressure, high blood pressure, for example, which may not be the right one to give when your patient's got anxiety or depression. And I think that kind of illustrates clearly that we really need to know the research behind those strains to really match up to where they're going to be most effective, which is what I call the new probiotic prescribing paradigm, where we match the action of the specific probiotic strain to the condition being treated or the physiology in need of adjustment. And this is not all that foreign to us because we prescribe herbs in the same way for the most part. At least I do anyway. I know we have different opinions on how we prescribe herbs at certain times, but we're often doing it to actually change physiology or to lift one's mood, to decrease inflammation, to work as antispasmodic, for example. So it's not too dissimilar to prescribing herbs or nutritional supplements or obviously pharmaceutical medicines where they're kind of matching things very closely with the research showing this drug does this specific action and we use it because it has that specific action. All right, so now that I've covered the sort of key points with probiotic prescribing, I want to go and bust some myths. So let's look at this one. Myth number one, and I was actually taught this myself back in the 90s when I trained in naturopathic medicine, where they were telling us that we should be telling our patients to prescribe or to take their probiotic supplements on an empty stomach or before bed, but definitely on an empty stomach. Now, there has been ample research done since the early 2000s showing that we actually have improved bacterial survival when taken with a meal, preferably a larger meal. Other research has found that those meals that have a higher dairy content or higher grain content actually optimize survival through the upper gut. Why? Because the actual pH of the stomach is less when it's actually got a big meal in there. It's less when we've got dairy or a grain-based meal in there because it kind of dilutes the pH. And the bacteria survive better at an hour at pH 4.5 than they do even 5 minutes at pH 2 or 2.5. So it's the best taken with or immediately before a meal or just right afterwards. I think all of those are quite suitable, but definitely not an empty stomach. And I think that's a key thing. So we can say that this myth is truly busted, even though it's still widely talked about online. Now I'm going to flag some red flags here that I think if we see, we should be scared. Not scared, but not want to use those supplements. Yeah. So if I'm looking at a probiotic supplement and it has the species listed but not the strain on the label, I would not use it. It tells me that they haven't put any specific, it's unlikely they put specific care into choosing what went into their supplement. If they're just putting species level data on the label, they probably haven't chosen a strain that has research on it, a strain that actually has gastric acid or bile salt stability shown in human studies. They probably haven't bothered doing that because they've just probably got a much cheaper strain that's kind of a no-name strain because you can put more of them into a supplement. And I think that's the other aspect too, that some of those high-potency multi-strain ones are essentially to pack that much bacteria in there, they have to choose low-grade strains to start with without any human research, because human research costs money. So if you're going to have a whole research lab that's doing in vitro research and animal research and human clinical trials, well, you're going to pay a premium for those strains with that kind of data set behind them, showing efficacy, showing characteristics, versus the budget strains were like, oh, I'm just going to look through some kimchi and pull out some lactobacilli and go and start selling them. You have no idea whether they've got characteristics that are useful or not, but it's pretty cheap and easy. And you could pack a lot of them into a supplement. And if nobody knows that actually matters, the strain details, then the companies get away with doing things like that. So for me, not listing the strain names on the label is a huge red flag, and